1 minute until showtime. 1 minute. Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome to episode number 16 of Yaron's News Briefing. Today is the 11th of January, and I've got like 10 news stories that I just picked out of the stream today. Today was there was a lot of interesting stuff going on that we can talk about. We're not going to get to all 10. We'll get to however many we get to. There's just something to say about almost everything that happens in the news, and there's a lot going on. New year, a lot of action out there, a lot of political stuff happening. If you want in the conversation, questions, you've been really good about questions over the last few weeks. A lot of young people are really encouraged by the fact that a lot of young people are calling in with questions on a wide range of topics. So keep doing that. I encourage you to keep doing that. 347-324-3075 and press 1 after you on the show. After you can hear the show on your headset, press 1 so that I know that you are there to ask a question. So a lot of stuff to talk about. I just wanted to start. Everybody's convinced that I'm obsessed with Donald Trump and how bad he is. And I don't think I'm obsessed, but I think he's really, really bad. And I try, okay, today I'm not going to talk about Trump, or today I'm not, but then he does stuff, and like, you can't not talk about it. So, for all of you Trump fans, you can click, you can disconnect now. But I'll do this quick. I promise. I do this quick. He did an interview today with the Wall Street Journal, which it's just fascinating to hear this guy speak off the cuff when he's done an interview. So he talks about North Korea. Now, you know what's going on with North Korea. I mean, he's threatening nuclear bombs, and he's calling the guy, what did he call the guy? He's called the guy a maniac and a bad dude and short and fat and rocket man and all this stuff. And then today in the Wall Street Journal, he says, and this is a quote, direct quote from Donald Trump, "I probably have a good relationship with Kim Jong-un." I mean, what is he, Dennis Rodman? He has a good relationship with Kim Jong-un? I have a relationship, and then he says, "I have relationships with people. I think you people are surprised." It's like he continuously has to, hey, I'm a good guy. I'm really, really smart. I'm a genius, I'm stable. It's just, wow. I have a pretty good relationship with people. And have a good relationship with Kim Jong-il. What does that even mean? He berated his Secretary of State for suggesting that negotiations with North Korea would be a good thing. And I kind of said, okay, I'm supportive of that because I don't think negotiation is a good thing. I think you can negotiate with evil. You should never sit down at the table with evil. Nothing good comes from negotiating with evil. America first, remember? A real America first strategy does not sit down and negotiate with evil. But now he's saying, no, he thinks it's a good idea to start talking to them, and he's got this great relationship with them. And he's asked, the Wall Street Journal asked him, how can you say that after all the things you've said about this guy? I mean, you've called him all these names, you've threatened to launch nuclear attack against him, and how can you say that you've got this great relationship with him? And Trump says, you'll see that a lot from me. He meant combative tweets. And then all of a sudden, somebody's my best friend. I could give you 20 examples. You could give me 30. I'm a very flexible person. I don't know. That was just too good not to share it. I mean, he's a pragmatist. He has no principles. He doesn't believe even what he himself says. He has no problem contradicting himself from one moment to another because, hey, he's a very flexible person. So, I don't know. That was just perfect. Just in that exchange, and you can read the rest of it. I mean, it's the same old stuff from Trump, but about how he's going to make Mexico pay for the wall through to NAFTA and all this finagling and all this nonsense. But it's just so, he admits it. I don't have to say he's a complete and utter pragmatist and he doesn't believe in anything and he's willing to change his mind on a dime and he doesn't have a mind to change. And because he says it himself, I'll tweet this stuff and then I'll change my mind. And of course, he did that today. And he really, Republicans were apoplectic. I mean, you almost saw them fainting on the House floor. He did that today with with this bill in the House that was being voted on, and it's because he tweeted that. So there was an amendment to this House bill. The House bill is a really bad bill. It's the bill that allows the NSA all these powers of surveillance. Really, bad bill in my view. And Justin Amash, who's good on a lot of things, bad on a few things, but good on a lot of things, and was proposing an amendment to the bill, which was a good amendment, which was going to limit the ability of the NSA and other intelligence agencies to actually spy on Americans. And Trump at some point, we're going to talk about that specifically in a minute, but Trump at some point tweets what everybody took as basically his support for the Justin Amash amendment. And then the story is, it's hard to tell what's actually going on, but the story is that all his advisors rushed in and said, oh, you can't do that. We actually support the bill. We're all in favor of the bill. We don't want the amendment. The amendment is really, really bad. We want to give the intelligence agencies, which Trump has berated and he hates and has said horrible, horrible things, more than any other president ever has said about the intelligence agencies. We want to give those intelligence agencies that he claimed in the past that he hated, we want to give them more power. So he tweeted a reversal. So he basically tweeted, no, I in a sense, I didn't mean what I said before. And the Republicans were apoplectic because they didn't know, should they vote with the president? What does the president want them to do? Because they want to, they're in a phase where they want to please the president. So they're trying to decide whether to vote for this or not, vote for the amendment or not. Now, in the end, of course, the amendment failed, and the House voted to renew the NSA bill that basically provides the ability for the NSA to listen in to conversations of foreign entities, people outside the United States, for the national security of the U.S. Now, I have problems even with that because it's too broad and it has always been too broad. The NSA uses that power, or in other words, it is guided in using that power to do all kinds of things which are in a completely violation of rights of people overseas and completely inappropriate to the function to the proper function of government. They do things like they listen to Angela Merkel's cell phone. That has nothing to do with terrorism. They listen to the phone conversations of the Brazilian oil company. That has nothing to do with national security. I'm sure that Trump has assigned the NSA to listen in on probably Mexican NAFTA negotiators, and Canadian NAFTA negotiators probably have their phones bugged by the NSA to give the U.S. Insight into what they're thinking as we're renegotiating NAFTA. All things that are completely inappropriate for the U.S. government to be doing. They're not a proper function of government. They don't have anything to do with protecting the individual rights of Americans. But worse than that, what the bill allows, it allows for the NSA basically to monitor all conversations of American citizens who might be conversing with one of these foreigners. And of course, one of these foreigners is very broad. It's not necessarily terrorists. It's a wide array of people, anyway from Angela Merkel to Brazilian oil companies to Russian oligarchs or whatever, right? And of course, they are listening to the American side of those conversations. And they can actually accumulate that, and they can search that for keywords, and they can actually prosecute somebody on something that they discover they did illegally in those conversations, even though they don't have a warrant to listen to this. I mean, this is an American citizen. You need a warrant. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment of search and seizure. And this bill basically allows them to do that. What Justin Amesh suggested, which was a moderate revision to their law, was to require that either a warrant be issued if you're going to listen to the American side of the conversation, or that whatever is discovered in listening to the American side of the conversation that is not related to terrorism, that is not related to that other side, cannot be used in criminal or prosecution of the American here in the United States. So it would be deemed, it would be like gaining evidence without a warrant. So, of course, the amendment failed. It failed big time. The Trump administration got heavily behind supporting the intelligence community, heavily behind extending this power to the NSA, the power that the NSA has had since the mid-2000s. And our privacy is out the room, out the door, out the window, or whatever metaphor you want to use. And of course, we have now the NSA again continues to be completely out of control in terms of what its powers allow it. Now, I don't know how many of you, some of you have heard me say this, but I was invited once a few years ago to the NSA to spend a whole day at the NSA, meeting and having presentations from top officials at the NFA. And I spent a whole day there with about 12 other kind of public intellectuals, basically with the NSA trying to pitch us that they were the good guys, right? That everything they did was good, everything they did was nice, everything they did followed proper procedure, everything they did was intended to safeguard the American public. And it was fascinating because I was there with a bunch of other intellectuals. I can't name names, and I can't actually tell you what they said or what the exchange was, because I committed to, I can't remember what the names of the rules are, the rules of not revealing what happens during a conference. There's a name for that, some convention. And I agreed to that. But what was interesting was the other intellectuals in the room were primarily conservatives who are huge supporters of the NSA and everything that they do. And I was really the only one there who was critical. I think the people who invited me were a little surprised, although the NSA, you could tell the people at the NSA knew exactly who I was. surprise, they knew who I was. They had listened to my conversations and they knew my point of view. But I was the only one asking any kind of tough questions. I mean, why are you listening to this? Why are you listening to that? What does Angela Merkel have to do with national security? And the answers I got were actually quite distressing. It was things like, we follow orders. It wasn't a non-disclosure agreement. It was more a gentleman's agreement. We follow orders. We do what our White House tells us to do. We don't question them, right? So, for example, in the Angela Merkel case, they said the White House asked us they asked us an open-ended question like, what is Angela Merkel thinking about the Russian offensive in Ukraine? All right. What is the NSA supposed to? How is the NSA supposed to know that? The job of the NSA is to listen. So they said, okay, well, that means they probably want us to tap our phone. So they went ahead and tapped their phone. Or the White House might ask them, wondering, what is this oil fine that the Brazilians, we want to enhance our ability to negotiate oil deals and stuff. Is this oil fine that the Brazilians are claiming, is it real? And what are they thinking about that? So what do? They go tap the Brazilian thing. And then we got into a whole issue of the drug war, and they huge amount of resources at the NSA are spent tapping into drug dealers outside the United States. Supposedly they're not allowed to listen in on Americans, unless, again, it's related to them listening in on something outside the United States. So they listen on drug dealers. So I asked them how listening in on drug dealers and how helping the war on drugs was in the national security interest of the United States and why it was essential for the protection of the lives and property of Americans. And they thought I was crazy. They thought I was, they looked at me and said, you don't understand how the drug war is related to the national security of the United States. There is a connection in the sense that drugs are used by terrorists to fund terrorists. I talked about that, about Hezbollah using the drug trade to fund terrorists a few shows ago. But that's not what we were talking about. We were talking about the war on drugs, war on drugs, the so-called war on drugs. I hate to call it a war. I hate to call it an action against an inanimate object a war. It's ridiculous. Anytime you have a war on an inanimate object, you're screwing up language in a big, significant way. So, the Trump administration, like most Republican administration, like the Obama administration, this is something that the swamp, that both left and right, that everybody agrees on, with very few exceptions. The bill passed 256 to 164. My guess is most 164 were Democrats just voting against because it's a Republican administration. Probably some of those 164 were Democrats who, when the Obama administration, proposed the same bill, voted for it then. Some Republicans voted against it. Again, Justin Amash primarily. Now it's going to the Senate. Rand Paul has promised to filibuster the bill. So all the power to Rand Paul on this. Again, the things about Rand Paul I don't like, but on this issue, I'm in agreement with him. And if he can raise awareness about the issue by filibustering and by offering amendments to it, and there are a few others. I think Senator Lee has opposed this. It would be nice. It would be really nice if Ted Cruz would support this. He did before he ran for president. So about 5-6 years ago, Cruz was one of the senators opposed to renewing this surveillance bill. But then when he ran for president, he completely abandoned that position and jumped in with the established Republicans to support spying on Americans and spying pretty much on everybody else in the world. This is horrible policy, and it's, again, a massive violation of the Fourth Amendment and a massive violation of rights of people all over the world, but primarily Americans. Again, sad that, but expected and unsurprising that the Trump administration is basically just a conventional Republican administration. With regard to the actual laws that get passed, it has the rhetoric of a completely different animal, But the actual practice, the actual laws that are being passed are pretty conventional, standard Republican stuff. Cut taxes in a pretty conventional way, nothing pretty outrageous in the tax cut that any other Republican wouldn't have proposed. And listen in on people's conversations. Everybody wants that. Everybody in power wants that, and they're not going to give up power. If you want to start chipping away at the so-called swamp, this would be a good opportunity. Reduce the power of the bureaucrats over our lives. All right. So we have talked about Trump's interview, and one other thing Trump said today. It's just worth commenting. It's just worth mentioning. You can do with it whatever you want. But this comment about why are we protecting immigrants from shithole countries? I mean, it's so collectivistic. It's so tribal. It's so racist. It's just, right? I mean, yeah, there are lots of shithole countries. Lots of shithole countries. And I'm the first to admit there are lots of shithole countries. But what's that have to do with the individuals who are here? I mean, judge the individuals. If they're shithole individuals, send them back. Or don't grant them citizenship or do whatever needs to be done. But don't penalize those individuals who are trying to escape their shithole countries to come to the United States, a country that wasn't a shithole, to try to improve their lives. Don't lump them in with the shithole countries. But that's exactly what he does. And this is exactly the point I made yesterday, where he might not be a out-and-out racist, although sometimes you wonder, but he is definitely sanctioning and creating a safe space, if you will, for racists out there with comments like this, because they feel right at home. They feel right at home. He didn't say they're just shithole countries out there, we should ignore them. He said, why are we protecting the individual immigrants that are in the United States from shithole countries? Yeah. Well, I'm living right now in one of those shithole places, so I'm sure on his list of shithole places is Puerto Rico. In spite of the fact that it's in the U.S., I'm sure it's on that list. So now I live there, so I don't know what that means. All right. I am going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'm happy to take your calls. If you want to call, 347-324-3075. I have another 7 or 8 stories to go through if you are interested, but I'm also quite happy to take one of your calls. We'll be right back after this quick break.
The idea that a person ought to be selfish is so alien to our culture that when people learn that Ayn Rand upheld a morality of selfishness, they are left scratching their heads. What could Rand possibly mean? In the new course, Being Selfish, Being Happy, at ARI campus, Dr. Tara Smith discusses the crucial features of Rand's morality of selfishness, what she called rational egoism, explaining what it is not, and why it is an individual's only means of achieving sustainable happiness. Visit ARI campus today and enroll in Being Selfish, Being Happy.
All right, thank you all, and we're back listening to Yaron Book Show. We're covering the news today, news briefings, and today's the 11th of January, and you can call in 347-324-3075. Any questions on any topic, happy to answer them. All right, let's see. I want to talk about just this interesting fact, but it's related to kind of the discussions about trade and about everything else that's going on today about American industry, American production, and Buy American, and all this nativist kind of stuff, in my view. And that is that Toyota just announced that it is going to build a plant. I think it is in South Carolina. And with building this plant and the production of these plants, of these cars, foreign automakers in the United States will be producing more cars in the United States than the big 3 American auto companies. So let me say that again. We are very close to the point where foreign auto companies in the United States will be building more cars than Detroit builds in the United States. Detroit, in a sense, is moving production out of the country as foreign automakers are moving production of automobiles into the country. Now, for a long time already, Americans have bought more foreign cars than American cars. That's been true for a while now. But this will be the first time that actual production of foreign car makers in the United States is greater. And this illustrates a number of things. I mean, a lot of things come into my mind when I hear this. One, what the hell did we need to bail out the auto companies? Everybody talks about bailing out the banks. But why did we bail out the auto companies? I mean, they are inefficient producers of a product that foreigners do better than we do here in the United States. We don't even have to ship them from out of state. They come here and they make the cars here. So if you're worried about American jobs, then they're right here. They're just not in Detroit, not in Michigan. They're in South Carolina, they're in Alabama, they're in Texas, they're in Georgia. They're in states that don't require the employees to be unionized. They're in states which have lower cost of production. And of course, why can't GM just move to South Carolina? Because the unions won't let them. The unions will shut them down. And of course now, because of the Obama bailouts and the deals I put in quote, because a deal is usually voluntary, but the deal that was crammed down the bondholders' throats in violation of the rule of law, in violation of the law in the United States, the deal that Obama crammed down the bondholders' throats now places the unions in a significant position to determine the fate of the American auto companies. So what the American auto companies are doing in order to escape the influence of the union is they can't go to another state in the United States. That would be unacceptable. But they're going to Mexico, they're going to China, and they're even going to India. And you'll see more and more and more GM and Ford cars being made in India, China, and Mexico. And you know, this is all a consequence of labor laws in the United States. So if you really cared about manufacturing jobs in the United States, or if you cared about jobs in the United States, or if you cared about, more importantly, freedom in the United States, what you would do if you wanted to really change the dynamics and if you wanted to be America first, is you would deregulate labor laws in America. And not through the regulatory agencies, through legislation that cannot be, or it's very difficult to overturn. So you would have a bill that gets rid of a lot of the protections. Now, you can't do all of them, so just start chipping away at it. So one thought is, if you really care about American jobs, that's the focus. The focus should be on deregulation, particularly the labor market. Reduce costs. And you know that would work, because just look at South Carolina, Alabama, Texas, and Georgia. Because that's where new auto plants are being built. They're not being built in Michigan. They're not being built by GM, Ford, or Chrysler. And the reason is labor laws and the protection of the union. Do away with that. Do away with that. And this is not a Democrats-Republicans deal. This is Republicans are almost as bad as Democrats here. Why aren't they trying to change that? Why aren't they talking about it? In the name of American jobs, in the name of America first, in the name of all these things. Why aren't they doing it? It just proves that it's all rhetoric. It just proves that it's all BS. They don't actually mean it. They don't actually care. And of course, the second thing that this brings up is the beauty of globalization. How wonderful globalization is. That the screwy laws in America are screwing American auto companies so they can go and produce in Mexico, India, or China. But they keep producing. How cool is that? And that the fact is that because transportation costs are relatively high, and because foreigners can find labor markets in the United States where they can build cars cheaply, foreign car companies can come to the United States and build their cars here. How beautiful is that? How beautiful is that? Globalization is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And one of the things that Trump and his minions are trying to destroy is this amazing phenomena of globalization that we've been experiencing, that we experienced during the 19th century and early 20th century, and then have been experiencing in ever greater sense since World War II, as the world has opened up to trade, as more and more trade has increased the standard of living of all human beings on the planet, Americans to a large extent, Mexicans, Chinese, Indians, Africans, everybody has benefited. More would be even better. Open up those borders, let trade flow. And yet, they want to demonize it, and they've got a word. They've chosen a word because they're clever. The left is always clever about these things, and I consider this a leftist ideology. Globalism. Globalism. To capture this evil of globalization. Again, globalism is a package deal between the idea of the UN and transnational organizations controlling laws and controlling people, and free trade. And they've created a package deal of the two. No! Separate those two out. One is bad and evil. We don't want the UN writing our laws. We don't want the UN controlling our lives. We don't want transnational entities dictating American policies. Bad. Global trade, fantastic. Globalization, amazing. One of the most beautiful things in the world today. Illustrating the beauty of freedom. Illustrating the beauty of what Adam Smith wrote in The Wealth of Nations. He got it 250 years ago. Go back and read. But no. For a variety of reasons. And this is the real damage of what Trump has done, and what all of you who support Trump are doing. Is you're creating these package deals and creating all these perspectives on the world, these ideas about the world that are destructive to America and to any decent human being around the planet. So a lot of damage is being caused by this administration in the way we think about the world. Not so much in the actual policies that they are following. The actual policies that they're following, for the most part, are conventional Republican policies. It's the language. It's what they're saying. It's how they're framing issues. It's how they are encouraging people to think about the world, which is incredibly damaging. The idea that trade is zero sum is incredibly damaging, and that's new. Even the most people on the left didn't do that. The Bernie Sanders did, but most people on the left didn't do that. So it really is horrible. Trade is one big example. The other one is people from shithole countries. That's another one. Framing it in terms of these collectives, in terms of these groups, in terms of, don't think about individuals. Think about, where do they come from? Oh, they come from a shithole country? Throw them out. They must be shitholes themselves. Imagine Ayn Rand coming from the real shithole country, the ultimate shithole countries, which was the Soviet Union. Right? This isn't about, I see, people jumping all over this isn't about open borders. I haven't said anything about open borders. I'm just talking about how you're talking about people and how you talk to people and about people and the collectivism that's entailed. There's a lot of space between open borders and the kind of sane immigration policy we could have today. There was not open borders, but it was not the insanity that exists today, or that Trump wants to make it in terms of even worse. There is indeed something that I've advocated for a long time in between, but you want to create straw man, that's fine. All right, let's now we've got callers, but you guys haven't pressed 1 to let me know that you want to ask a question. All right, there we go. The first one pressed 1. That's cool. So let's take this question. Hi, you're on the Yaron Book Show. Who's this?
Hi, this is Gavin.
Hey, Gavin, how's it going?
Fantastic. I love all your YouTube videos. Question about Gary Cohn, who's Trump's economic, I think, or something like that, advisor.
He is. He's the
big Goldman Sachs guy.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I don't, it's funny to me that everybody who advises the president who promised to drain the swamp is from Goldman Sachs. I mean, that's just amusing, right? So his Treasury Secretary is Steve Mnuchin, who was a Goldman Sachs guy. His chief economic advisor is Gary Cohn, who's a Goldman Sachs guy. I mean, it's just funny. It's just entertaining. They are, in terms of their views on economics, they are as mainstream as it comes. They are, they're not socialists. They're moderate, I'd say, middle of the road Keynesians. They're definitely statists. They're definitely central planners. They want some deregulation and some government intervention. The middle of the road Republican. I mean, I think Gary Cohn was even a Democrat. The middle of the road nothings. I don't think much of either one of them. They were probably very good investment bankers. You don't become president or senior partner at Goldman Sachs unless you're really, really smart and a really, really really both smart and really, really good investment banker. But that doesn't mean they know anything about economics or that they know how to run an economy, and I don't believe either one of them does. And I've seen no evidence that they really want to move the U.S. economy towards more free markets, which is what I would like.
Do you think there's any chance to get anyone of the Austrian school or any type of objectivist anywhere near a mainstream Republican anytime soon?
You're making me laugh. But, John Allison was interviewed. John Allison, who I think would consider himself at least a supporter of the Austrian economics and an objectivist. And John Allison was interviewed for Treasury Secretary. But he was never going to get the job. He was interviewed for chairman of the Federal Reserve, but he doesn't want it. I mean, John Allison, doesn't want to work for Trump, I think, and also realizes that even if he did work in that administration, he couldn't get anything done. He would need Congress's support. Again, to really change things, you need legislation. You can't just do it at the regulatory agency level. So you need Congress's support, which he wouldn't have gotten. How is he going to become chairman of the Fed where he's publicly stated that he doesn't believe a Fed should exist? And if he was asked in his hearings, in his confirmation hearings, do you believe there should be a Federal Reserve? I think John would have said, no, I don't. And there's no way Congress would have confirmed him as chairman. So there was no point. So no, I don't think that anybody can do it right now without selling their soul, particularly with the Trump administration, without selling their soul.
I get depressed. It's like it's just a flash in the pan with Trump, and then we're going to go back to the same Obama stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Trump is not that different in terms of policy than Obama. I mean, it's not that. I gave the example early on about the NSA listing stuff. I mean, that was a Bush policy, an Obama policy, and a Trump policy. No change. No change.
Can I just put one thing in about this? My brother, he's a married guy.
Sure.
And I see why he votes for a guy like Obama, because his house goes up as they inflate the house, and his kids get nicer schools.
Yeah.
So he's got no incentive to vote for Trump at all.
No, I mean,
all the family guys are just bought and owned.
Yeah, I mean, if what you care about is short-term monetary gain, then Obama wasn't that bad for you. When he came into office, the stock market was really low. He did really well in the stock market. Housing prices went up really nicely. He gave out loans to everybody who wanted to attend any university, no matter how much it cost. Now, we're all going to have to pay for all that. So your brother, his children are going to pay for that dearly in the future. But that requires long-term thinking.
He won't listen to me, though. I played one video of yours for him, and he's just like, I wouldn't vote for anything that guy proposes. And I'm like, dude, we haven't even finished watching like a 20-minute video.
They're not interested.
It was just like gut,
Yep.
I didn't know what to do. It was just unbelievable.
Yep. Yeah, they're not listening. They're not interested in facts. And again, unfortunately, I think Trump is no different than these guys. I think it's all the same. It's all the same swamp. And we need, and I've said this many, many times. What this country needs is a philosophical, ideological revolution. It doesn't need politics. It doesn't need politicians. We're not going to get better politicians until we fundamentally change the ideas that people believe in. And as long as people believe that everything's fine, that the status quo is great, that the government intervention in all of our lives, constantly in every single dimension of it, is a good thing, then nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to change. So it's ideas and fundamental ideas. I'm talking about ethics. It's about people. If people don't adopt some form of rational egoism, and reject all forms of altruism, of your purpose of your life is to live for other people, if they don't reject those ideas, it's hopeless. It really is hopeless. So we can talk politics all day long, but it's morality that changes the world. It's philosophy that changes the world. It's not politics. Great. Thanks for calling. I'm glad you're enjoying my videos. Keep watching. Share them. Spread them around.
I get irritated watching other material on television after I've seen this stuff and kind of got the gist of it over a few years. I mean,
yep.
I'm just like flabbergasted because you just, whatever side of the aisle you're on, Republican, Democrat, it's always about more control, more regulation. It's like
exactly.
There's no one saying the opposite except maybe Rand Paul. I mean, and maybe
sometimes
a couple of those other guys, the guy in Utah.
Yeah, sometimes, and even the guy in Utah.
It's bad here in Boston too. In Boston,
Boston's
really
terrible.
bad.
And the guy from Utah, he's so religious, so he gets on this thing about he justifies capitalism in a complete wrong way, in a way where he will never win, he'll never be successful. He's a complete sellout when it comes to ethics and morality, and that's where the real battle is. Unless we win the battle for selfishness, for self-interest, and destroy, completely annihilate the altruists and the ideology of altruism, we have no hope. We have no hope. All right, thanks for the call. Keep on listening. Keep on watching. Don't give up, guys. Life's worth living. It's fun after all, in spite of all this bad stuff. And the fight is a good fight. So let's keep fighting, even though the chances of winning anytime soon are almost zero. All right. Hi, you're on the Yaron Book Show. Who's this?
Hi, this is Jacob Meyer from Australia.
Hey, Jacob, Australia. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, from the Gold Coast. Probably got as much sun as you got in LA.
Well, I'm not in LA anymore. I've moved to Puerto Rico, so I get sun all year round, all the time. No mudslides, no fires, and no earthquakes.
Oh, that's beneficial. Yeah. Tell you what, I've been thinking about rational self-interest a lot more lately, particularly listening to you and different objectivists talking about things on Sargon Akkad, talking to Raka Raka.
Yeah.
And just other things like that. But I was thinking about energy policy because I'm studying chemical engineer right now.
Good. And
the energy policies here in Australia have really sort of led to a lot of adoption of solar power, wind power, and everything. And it's been a lot of adoption of it, and I think it's helped grow the industries themselves. But are they? Would you say in your mind a good thing to have done in the early days of producing energy that's renewable?
Yeah. No, I mean, first, let me just say this. You should start following a guy by the name of Alex Epstein from the Center for Industrial Progress.
Yeah, I've listened to some of his arguments, definitely, and read a lot of his stuff. And I found that it's rather reasonable to follow a lot of what he says.
Yeah, I agree with Alex completely.
Would you say that?
I'd say that investing in these resources is a waste of money. It's throwing it down the toilet. I mean, if you invest a lot of money in solar, the price of solar will go down because innovation in places like China and else in the United States will happen. But is that a good use of capital? Is that the most productive use of capital? No, because the only reason it's being invested is because of government incentives, government subsidies, big, huge government subsidies. And without those government subsidies, there would be almost none of this investment. None of these investment. So you can tell that an investment doesn't make any sense when the only reason it's being made is because the government is incentivizing it, is bribing people to make it.
Yeah. Well, I see these sorts of issues and stuff. You can talk to your everyday person about energy issues, and then they don't really care too much until it starts hurting their bottom line, which in Australia it sort of has because we've sort of been moving away from coal, and we've been investing in a whole lot of these different energy resources that
which is
ridiculous,
in a way
costing a lot more money than what they're producing.
Yeah, which is ridiculous at a time when natural gas is so cheap. I mean, it's replacing coal, it's replacing almost everything in terms of producing electricity, and it's so cheap. And talk about renewable energy. It's not a renewable energy, but it seems like almost infinite supply of natural gas and oil because now we're using fracking. And there's just more and more discoveries in places where we never knew there was natural gas. We never thought there was oil. I mean, we haven't even started drilling in places like Ukraine and the off the coast of the United States. I mean, there's so much natural gas and oil out there that it's hard. It boggles the mind in terms of the quantity. And there's no limit. Prices. There's no reason in the long term for prices to go up because the supply is so robust. That I just, I think that this investment in so-called renewable energy is wasteful, it's dangerous, it's destructive, and in the long run, it's going to dramatically raise the cost of energy, which, energy is life. And when you raise the cost of energy, fewer people can afford it, and it kills people. It literally kills people. So I would definitely follow Alex Epstein. I would read his book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuel. It's an excellent book.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for calling. Really appreciate it. Okay, we got one more caller. Hi, you're on the Yaron Book Show. Who's this?
Hi,
Hello?
this is Sam.
Hey, Sam. Speak up. Barely hear you.
Hello. This is Sam. Can you hear me better?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I just have a quick question. I've been thinking more about morality, and I've been thinking about restaurants because I've had probably about 3 people now who works in the restaurant industry, waiters, and they said that they always tell me that it's the customer's moral kind of obligation to pay for tips.
Yep.
And I get confused about that because I've always thought as tips to be like if I want to reward a service, then it's like a donation. But they start talking about taxes and all of this, and some of them get upset when people don't tip.
Yep.
And so I'm wondering if there's a moral dilemma in that mentality. Maybe there's a system that doesn't work when it comes to restaurant businesses.
Yeah, I think the system doesn't work. I don't like the tipping culture in restaurants and elsewhere. I think it's really become corrupted. I think this idea that tip is just expected, that's the standard. Why not just you raise the prices and pay the waiters more and then leave a tip for really exceptional performance? But that's not the culture. I tip because I know that these people won't get paid if you don't tip because their salary comes from the tipping. And I want them to be paid. I think it's just for them to be paid. But I think the system is wrong. And some restaurants, I know in New York and other places around the country, have starting to change that. And they're having a no tipping policy where you're not supposed to tip and where you're encouraged not to tip because they're just paying their waiters a proper wage. And then I guess if you leave a $20 bill on the table because you had good service, nobody's going to not take it. But it's not expected, and nobody demands it, and nobody thinks about it. So tip should be, but we've moved away from that. And as a culture, I don't know how it started. I think it has to do with minimum wage laws. It has to do with exceptions for waiters. It has to do with the fact that tips are not taxed because it's cash and they put it in their pocket and they don't report it. Some of the tips, but then tips on credit cards are taxed because it's reported. So it's complicated. There are probably a lot of causes for it. But I think my approach is I got service, I'm going to tip. If it's exceptional service, I tip more. But I think justice demands, given that they're not getting paid, that you tip something.
Right.
And
okay.
And let's hope this culture of tipping changes. There are other countries in which this doesn't exist. In Germany and in much of Europe, you only tip for exceptional services. You just don't do it. All right. Thanks for the call. I really appreciate it. All right. I'm willing to take another call, but you guys have to press 1 to let me know that you want to ask a question. Otherwise, I don't know. So I guess you don't want to ask a question. There's somebody from 513 area code, somebody from 586 area code. I guess you're not interested in asking a question. Cool. Then we are basically going to wrap things up. I've got a bunch of other news stories here, in particular Walmart. Maybe I'll talk about Walmart on Saturday. So on Saturday, I'll be back on Radical Capitalist on the Blaze. It'll be at 12 o'clock East Coast time. And you can catch me on YouTube, on Facebook, and on theblazeradio.com/radio. And keep watching YouTube. Keep watching a lot of the stuff. Everything here goes up on YouTube. You can, please share. And if you get value out of this show, if this enhances your life and you would like to show your appreciation, feel free to go to Patreon and support the show. It'll also make the show better. The more money raised in Patreon, the more I'm going to invest in marketing, which will expand the reach of the show, and the more I will invest in the technical quality of the show. So I'm hoping to one day hire a full-time producer and kind of create a nice background here, maybe a green screen, who knows, and really work on it. So would appreciate it, and thank you in advance to anybody who goes online and invests in the Yaron Brook Show through patreon.com. All right, thank you all. Have a great evening, and hopefully I'll be chatting with you again on Saturday. Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.